Most American households think they are ready for a crisis. There is a bag of rice in the back of a cabinet, a few canned goods on the shelf, and some leftover pasta from the last Costco run. That feels like enough, and honestly, for a few days, it might be. But here is the uncomfortable truth that most preparedness guides never address directly. The families that stay healthy and functional during extended emergencies are rarely the ones with the most food. They are the ones who closed a specific gap that almost nobody talks about. That gap is not about quantity, it is about structure, the right structure. Because calories alone do not keep people healthy, sharp, or even willing to eat. And that distinction matters enormously when conditions stay difficult for more than a week. Most standard emergency food plans break down the same way. People have enough energy on paper, but morale drops, appetite fades, and the same meals become harder to face every day. The 15 items below help prevent that breakdown. Every single one costs under $5. Most are available at any Walmart, Kroger, or Safeway right now, and almost none of them appear on the typical preparedness checklist you find online. One more note before we start: the number one item on this list is not food at all, and it may matter more than everything else combined. 15. Cornmeal here is something that nutrition researchers have documented repeatedly in long-term institutional diet studies. When people eat the same foods in the same format day after day, appetite drops. Not because they are full, not because the food is gone, because the brain starts resisting repetition at a physiological level. People eat less, even when there is plenty available. Cornmeal is one of the most affordable solutions to that problem. At $1 to $2 per pound, with a sealed shelf life of 2 to 3 years, what makes it valuable is not the calories, it is the range. From a single stored ingredient, you can produce polenta, porridge, cornbread, skillet flatbread, or pan-fried cakes. Each one has a completely different texture and mouthfeel, which is exactly what breaks the monotony cycle before it starts. There is also a familiarity advantage. Most Americans have eaten cornbread or grits at some point in their lives. Familiar foods during stressful situations require less mental resistance to eat. That psychological factor is more significant than most people give it credit for. The beginner mistake in emergency planning is always the same: buy more of what you already have. The result is a pantry with depth but almost no variety. In real extended use, that approach tends to collapse faster than the food does. 14. Baking soda, under $1 per pound. 3 completely different functions. That cost-to-utility ratio is almost impossible to beat anywhere on this list. The first function is leavening. Combined with stored flour or cornmeal, baking soda lets you make simple, quick breads without yeast or eggs, both of which are genuinely difficult to store long-term. Research on extended dietary hardship consistently shows that warm, familiar foods reduce psychological stress in ways that cold, calorie-equivalent options simply cannot. The ability to produce something resembling bread matters more than most people expect. The second function is sanitation. Baking soda is mildly abrasive and naturally deodorizing. When commercial cleaning products are unavailable, it still works effectively on food prep surfaces. You are not just storing a cooking ingredient, you are storing a basic hygiene tool. The third function is one that most people never discover. Adding baking soda to beans during the soaking phase neutralizes certain compounds that cause digestive discomfort and actually shortens required cook time. One simple step delivers better digestion, faster cooking, and reduced fuel use simultaneously. The common mistake here is assuming the box already in your kitchen will be available when needed. Regular household use depletes it gradually, and a dedicated reserve supply is simply not there when the moment arrives. Set aside a separate box. Keep it exclusively for your emergency reserve. At under $1, there is genuinely no reason not to. 13. Iodized salt. Specifically iodized, ask almost any American if they have salt in their emergency supply. Almost all of them will say yes. And almost all of them are storing the wrong type without realizing it. Salt is one of the most ancient food tools in human history. Before refrigeration existed, it was how food survived. In a disruption today, it still performs preservation, flavor, and electrolyte functions that nothing else replicates at this price. But the specific type you store has health consequences that most preparedness guides completely overlook. Iodized salt contains added iodine. Iodine is essential for thyroid function, which regulates metabolism, energy, cognitive performance, and body temperature, every one of which comes under strain during an extended emergency. When people shift away from a normal diet, iodine-rich foods like seafood, dairy, and packaged processed foods disappear quickly. Studies on populations that lost reliable access to iodized salt show that cognitive effects from deficiency can appear within weeks, not months. The early symptoms are not physical. They are mental, reduced concentration, impaired decision-making, and fatigue. In a situation where clear thinking directly determines outcomes, that timeline is serious. Many Americans have switched to sea salt or Himalayan pink salt in everyday cooking. Those alternatives typically contain no added iodine. The price difference between iodized and non-iodized salt is roughly nothing, maybe 40 cents per pound. The consequence of getting this wrong is not nothing. 12. Apple cider vinegar. This is consistently the item that surprises people most when they see it on a preparedness list. At $3 to $5 per bottle, it looks out of place, but it solves multiple separate problems at once, and it has one storage advantage that almost nothing else on this list can claim: it genuinely never expires. Vinegar is a fermentation product carried to a point of chemical stability. There is no meaningful ongoing degradation. A bottle stored for 10 years performs identically to one opened yesterday. Indefinite shelf life under $5 is rare. That alone justifies a spot in any serious pantry. The application most people never anticipate is digestive. When a household shifts to a legume-heavy emergency diet, beans and lentils as daily staples rather than occasional sides, the physical discomfort that follows is real and well documented. And that discomfort is one of the most common reasons emergency eating plans quietly collapse. People reduce their intake not because food is scarce, but because they feel bad after eating. Adding a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar during cooking reduces that digestive response noticeably and improves the texture of legumes. Beyond cooking, its acidity inhibits bacterial growth on food preparation surfaces, making it a practical sanitation tool when commercial cleaners are unavailable. Research also points to its role in improving mineral absorption from plant-heavy diets, exactly the kind of diet an emergency pantry produces. One bottle, 4 distinct functions. 11. Raw honey. Archaeologists have recovered sealed containers of honey from burial sites thousands of years old. Laboratory analysis confirmed it was still chemically safe to consume. That is not folk legend. It is documented in peer-reviewed archaeological chemistry research. The chemistry behind it explains everything. Honey has extremely low moisture content, which deprives microorganisms of the water they need to survive. Its pH is highly acidic, sitting between 3.2 and 4.5. It also generates trace amounts of hydrogen peroxide through natural enzyme activity. Those three factors together create a storage environment that is chemically hostile to bacterial and fungal growth. The result is an effectively indefinite shelf life when properly sealed. Crystallization happens over time but is fully reversible with gentle heat and has zero effect on safety or quality. Honey's most underappreciated function in an emergency context has nothing to do with calories. Research from resource-limited diet studies consistently shows that access to something sweet plays a measurable role in maintaining appetite during extended dietary restriction. When meals become repetitive and narrow, Having something sweet changes the experience of eating and directly influences whether people maintain adequate intake across days and weeks. Nutrition researchers treat this as an appetite maintenance variable, not simply a comfort factor. A single jar at 1 tablespoon per person per day lasts a family of 4, roughly 3 to 4 weeks. Storing more than 1 jar is not indulgent. It is rational planning. 10. Ghee. There is a category of emergency preparedness failure that only reveals itself when the power has been out for 3 days. You planned carefully. You stocked grains, legumes, canned protein. Everything looks complete on a spreadsheet. Then the refrigerator stops working, and within a few days you realize your cooking fat situation is not what you thought. Standard butter contains milk solids and moisture, which is what makes it perishable. Without reliable refrigeration, it becomes functionally useless as a stored fat source within days. Ghee is butter with both the milk solids and water removed, leaving behind nearly pure butterfat. That single change transforms its storage behavior entirely. Properly sealed ghee remains stable at room temperature for up to 2 years. After opening, it holds for months under normal conditions. There is also a practical cooking advantage. Many common oils oxidize under high heat and develop off flavors when used on camp stoves or cast iron, both common in disrupted cooking situations. Ghee has a smoke point above 400 F and handles high heat without breaking down or changing flavor. A typical jar costs around $4 for 7 to 12 ounces. In a diet built around grains and legumes, the body consistently signals a need for fat. When fat is persistently absent from the diet, energy output drops and food stops feeling satisfying. Research shows that effect directly reduces how much people eat over time. Ghee closes that gap at low cost, with a room temperature storage profile that very little else on this list can match. 9. Bouillon powder. Picture day 10 of living off your emergency food supply. Calories covered, nobody going hungry, everything looks fine from the outside. But something is happening that the numbers never show. Meals have started to feel like a task. The same plain rice, the same flat beans, the same smell, the same texture, twice a day. And slowly, without anyone naming it, people start eating less, not because they are not hungry, but because they cannot make themselves do it again. Researchers in humanitarian and emergency nutrition have consistently identified flavor fatigue as a primary driver of reduced food intake in crisis situations. It can appear well before any physical food shortage occurs. It is not a willpower issue. It is a documented physiological response. Bouillon powder is the most affordable and direct solution to that problem. At $3 to $5 per jar, a single container produces 30 to 50 servings of broth or seasons dozens of portions of rice, beans, lentils, or oats. The same caloric base cooked the same way suddenly becomes a different eating experience. When meals taste distinct from each other, the mental resistance to eating drops significantly. The food has not changed, the experience of it has. And that shift is what determines whether people sustain adequate intake across days and weeks of limited options. In terms of intake maintenance value per dollar, a $3 jar of bouillon powder may outperform items costing 10 times as much. 8. Dried mushrooms. This is where most people push back. Dried mushrooms? That sounds like something from a specialty food aisle, not an emergency pantry. That reaction is understandable, and it is exactly why this gap exists in almost every American household's food reserve. Dried shiitake and porcini mushrooms, both available at most mainstream grocery stores for $3 to $5, contain naturally occurring compounds called glutamates. These compounds produce umami, the fifth basic taste, the savory depth associated with rich, protein-heavy meals. It is the quality that makes food feel genuinely satisfying rather than just filling. Grain and legume-based diets are structurally low in glutamates. The result is not hunger, It is a specific kind of incompleteness. Adequate calories that still feel like something is missing. Food scientists have identified this as the calories without reward effect, and it produces appetite fatigue that is separate from caloric deficit. It can reduce overall intake even when sufficient food is physically available. Half an ounce of rehydrated dried mushrooms stirred into rice or lentils changes the entire character of the meal. The umami contribution makes simple food feel substantially more complete, closer to what people recognize as an actual meal rather than survival rations. There is a nutritional dimension as well. Dried shiitake mushrooms are among the very few non-animal sources of vitamin D, a nutrient that effectively disappears from grain-heavy diets. They also contribute a meaningful range of B vitamins. Small bag, low cost. Disproportionate effect on both nutrition and sustained appetite. 7. Canned tuna in oil, not in water. This choice gets made by habit, not by thought. Tuna packed in water is more visible on store shelves. It is the lighter option. It is what most Americans grew up eating. For everyday use, that is perfectly fine. For an emergency stockpile, it quietly undermines two things that genuinely matter. A standard can of tuna in water delivers roughly 100 calories. Tuna in oil delivers 180 to 220 calories per can, depending on oil retention. That is up to 120 additional calories per can, and across weeks of rationed eating where every calorie is doing real work, that margin accumulates into a meaningful difference between meeting energy needs and consistently falling short. But the oil is doing something beyond adding calories. Grain and legume-heavy diets are structurally low in fat, and that creates a specific problem over time. Humanitarian and field nutrition research has repeatedly documented that adequate fat intake plays a direct role in appetite maintenance when diets are repetitive. Without enough fat, people reduce their intake even when food is available, not because they are satisfied, but because meals stop feeling rewarding. The price difference between the two versions is roughly 20 to 50 cents per can. The caloric and functional return on that small investment is one of the highest anywhere on this list. 6. Whole fat powdered milk, not skim fresh dairy, is one of the first things to disappear in any disruption. Once refrigeration becomes unreliable, it is gone within days. Powdered milk is the practical stored alternative, but only when you choose the right type. Skim powdered milk is more prominently stocked in most American grocery stores. Most people default to it. In a regular diet with adequate fat coming from other sources, that is acceptable. In an emergency stockpile context, that default creates a compounding nutritional problem. The first issue is caloric density and satiety. Whole fat powdered milk provides more energy per serving and keeps you satisfied longer between meals. When total daily intake is already limited, that difference compounds more than people expect. The second issue is more significant. Whole fat powdered milk contains fat-soluble vitamins A, D, E, and K. These vitamins require dietary fat to be properly absorbed. Without sufficient fat present during digestion, absorption rates drop substantially, meaning skim powdered milk can list those nutrients on its label and still fail to deliver them in any meaningful quantity. In a stockpile diet already limited in vitamin D and calcium, that absorption failure does not stay minor. It builds into a real deficit across days and weeks. At $4 to $6 per container, with a 2 to 5 year shelf life, whole fat powdered milk is one of the most accessible ways to close the vitamin and mineral gaps that a standard emergency pantry reliably produces. 5. Red lentils. Most people treat lentils as a supporting ingredient, something that fills out a meal rather than anchors it. That is a significant underestimation of what red lentils actually deliver. Start with the operational advantage. Red lentils cook in 15 to 20 minutes over a basic camp stove. For a legume, that is unusually fast. Every minute of reduced cook time is direct fuel savings. When fuel is limited or uncertain, that efficiency compounds across every meal, every day, for the full duration of a disruption. The nutritional case is more impressive than most people expect. Red lentils carry a protein digestibility score that approaches well-prepared animal proteins, something documented in sports nutrition research but rarely mentioned in preparedness discussions. Among plant protein sources at this price point, they are among the most bioavailable available. There is also a structural cooking advantage. Red lentils dissolve completely into soups, stews, and grain dishes. They blend invisibly into whatever base they are added to, creating textural variety without requiring separate preparations or additional ingredients. No soaking required. Under $2 per pound, sealed shelf life of 10+ years. Red lentils are one of the most capable foundations on this entire list. 4. Dried pinto beans, not canned. This is the most common entry-level mistake in food reserve building, and it is entirely understandable how it happens. Someone reads that beans are a core emergency staple. They head to the canned goods aisle, fill the cart. The cans stack neatly. Labels show reassuring shelf dates. Everything looks organized. But once you examine the actual numbers, canned beans become very difficult to justify in a serious stockpile. Dried pinto beans run $1 to $1.50 per pound and deliver roughly 1,600 calories with about 110 grams of protein. A standard 15-ounce can cost 80 cents to $1.20 and, after accounting for water content, provides around 350 calories. You are largely paying for water weight and packaging. The shelf life comparison is equally stark. Dried beans stored in airtight containers remain viable for 10 years or more. Canned beans begin declining in quality between 3 and 5 years. A can has one form and one outcome. Dried beans have several. Yes, soaking takes planning. Preparation requires more effort. A food reserve that demands more of you tends to give substantially more back, not just in calories, but in options. 3. Old-fashioned rolled oats, not instant. Here is a mistake that even people who already know oats belong in a stockpile consistently make. They buy them and reach for the instant version. In doing so, they quietly downgrade one of the most capable items on this list. The difference between old-fashioned rolled oats and instant oats is not about cooking time. It is about what happens inside your body after eating them. Instant oats are cut into finer pieces and pre-steamed more aggressively during manufacturing. That extra processing raises the glycemic index, meaning blood sugar rises faster and drops faster. Energy arrives quickly and leaves quickly. Hunger returns sooner than it should. On a normal day with unrestricted food access, that is a minor inconvenience. In a disrupted environment where meals are rationed and stress is elevated, shorter-lasting fuel is a genuine liability. Nutrition research in endurance and field settings has consistently documented that glycemic index plays a larger role in sustained energy output than most people building stockpiles recognize. Old-fashioned rolled oats also outlast instant in storage. In a sealed container with an oxygen absorber, they reliably hold nutritional value for 2 years or more, and many experienced preppers report no meaningful quality decline at 5 years and beyond. The extra processing in instant oats creates more exposed surface area, which accelerates oxidation over time. Under $1 per pound, roughly 1,700 calories and 60 grams of protein per pound. A 10-pound supply costing around $10 to $12 covers a substantial caloric reserve for a family of 4. Convenience is what instant oats offer. An emergency reserve is not designed to solve a convenience problem. 2. Long-grain white rice, standard not parboiled long-grain white rice, is the most universally recognized emergency staple that exists. Dense calories, long shelf life, accepted by nearly every family. Most people include it without much deliberation. That instinct is correct. What is not correct is reaching for whatever bag is on the shelf, because that one quiet choice can silently cut usable shelf life by 15 years. When water access is limited or uncertain, which it frequently is during real disruptions, that additional demand is a real constraint. Standard long-grain white rice avoids both problems. Longest storage life, least demanding preparation, 20 to 80 cents per pound depending on the store. Most people grab whatever is on the shelf without thinking twice. But when one decision determines whether your food lasts 10 years or 25, what you pick up actually matters. 1. A standard daily multivitamin. This is the only item on this list that is not food. That distinction is completely intentional, and it is what makes this the most important entry here. A 365-count bottle of standard multivitamins costs $8 to $15. Shelf life is typically at least 2 years. 4 bottles covers a family of 4 for a full year of daily baseline supplementation. The cost is lower than a single fast food meal for one person. Here is what most emergency food guides do not state plainly. Even a well-planned, calorically sufficient emergency stockpile will develop micronutrient deficiencies within a relatively short period once it becomes the primary diet. This is not a planning failure. It is a structural limitation of affordable, shelf-stable foods. No realistic combination of stored goods fully replicates the micronutrient range that fresh produce, varied animal proteins, and fermented foods normally deliver. Research on emergency and restricted variety diets consistently identifies the same early-onset deficiencies in grain and legume-heavy eating, thiamine, folate, vitamin C, and zinc. These appear faster than most people expect. But here is the part that changes how most people think about this issue. The first signs of micronutrient deficiency are not physical. They are cognitive. Reduced concentration, increased irritability, difficulty making clear decisions, mental fatigue. These effects appear before any visible physical symptoms. In a situation where the quality of your thinking directly determines outcomes, where being sharp is not optional, early cognitive impairment is a compounding vulnerability that affects every other decision you are trying to make. A daily multivitamin does not perfectly replicate every nutrient, but it meaningfully reduces the gap at a cost that no food-based solution can match. Most people building emergency food reserves focus almost entirely on macronutrients: calories, protein, carbohydrates, fat. Micronutrient coverage gets treated as secondary, something to address later. In practice, it is part of what keeps every other system functioning, and it costs less than a single dinner out. Step back and look at what this list actually represents. Not the most dramatic sounding items, not the ones with the most impressive packaging. Every item here earns its place through a single standard: how it actually performs when the gap between looking prepared and being prepared begins to show. Old-fashioned oats over instant because sustained energy matters more than morning convenience. Standard long-grain rice over parboiled because 25 years of viability is not the same as 10. Dried beans over canned because caloric efficiency, storage duration, and flexibility all favor dry goods by margins that are simply too wide to ignore. Red lentils for cooking speed and protein quality that almost no preparedness guide mentions. Tuna in oil because fat density matters in a diet already depleted of it. Raw honey for its documented indefinite stability and its role in appetite maintenance. Ghee because it solves the room temperature fat problem in a way nothing else does. Apple cider vinegar because preservation, mineral absorption, sanitation, and cooking versatility are compressed into one bottle that never degrades. Bouillon powder because flavor fatigue is a documented driver of dietary failure, not merely a comfort issue. Baking soda because it performs 3 distinct jobs for under $1. Cornmeal because format variety sustains intake in ways that caloric stacking never will. Dried mushrooms because umami is a physiological appetite driver, not just a culinary preference. Iodized salt because one word on the label prevents a consequence almost nobody plans for. Whole fat powdered milk because fat determines whether the vitamins on the label are actually absorbed. And a multivitamin because micronutrient coverage is not optional and costs almost nothing relative to what it protects. None of these require special sourcing. None require a large budget. None require any particular expertise. What they require is the right knowledge, applied in a calm moment before the moment of pressure arrives. The most common preparedness mistake is not buying too little. It is optimizing for what looks prepared instead of what performs prepared. A shelf full of bulk bags looks reassuring. A $3 jar of bouillon powder does not. But that jar may do more to sustain real nutrition across 3 weeks of disruption than items costing 10 times as much. Every one of these 15 items is available right now at your nearest grocery store for under $5. The question is simply whether you go get them before you need them or after.